It's 5:30, so we will call this meeting to order. Welcome, bienvenidos to our regular board meeting at Vancouver Public Schools this Tuesday, August 8th. Before we get started, I want to share a few thoughts and reminders. We want our boardroom to be a welcoming, safe space for all and any of our community members and guests. As this is a business meeting, we do expect those in attendance to conduct themselves in a respectful way. We would ask that you do not interrupt the meeting, and if there's any immediate need that you have, such as an audio concern or question, please move to the back and let any one of our staff members know. As a reminder, there is a designated space for any video recording and/or media. We will now get started with our business meeting and the items on our agenda. We will now do roll call. Director Decker. I'm here. Director Sproul. Wow. Here. Director Barrows. Here. And Director Smith. Here. And I am also here. We're all in attendance and we have quorum. So first we'll start with our superintendent report. Dr. Snell.
Thank you. Share my screen for those attending at home and here. Welcome to the board meeting here in August. This is our last regular board meeting that's kind of in the summer hours. June, July, and August are usually a little out of the normal cadence that we usually get into during the school year. So we're glad to see people here and hope that you're having a good summer. For my superintendent report tonight, I want to talk a little bit about the board retreat that we had earlier today and some of the back to school information and some of the projects that staff have been working on. So just to, I know all the board was here during the retreat. We had some guests during the retreat as well, but we talked about the strategic planning work, had a workshop in June as well. And I would say over the last 6 board meetings, we've been giving updates. Committee members have been representing the work, and we're at a point where we're looking ahead to October. We'll bring a strategic plan before the board for your consideration and hopeful adoption. And so today, we spent some time looking at the vision of a graduate statement that was drafted using the input from our community. We looked at some of the attributes of a vision of a graduate and the descriptors of those attributes. And then we talked about 3 priority goal areas and how those priorities connected to existing policy and structure within our district. And so made the connection between what was articulated in our equity policy as being priorities, such as student learning and culture and climate, and how those connect to the priorities that emerged from the strategic plan feedback. And I'll highlight some of those this evening and entertain any comments or questions from the board. And so the first priority area is around the student-centered experience, how our students engage and experience school and around and before and after school. And the aspirational goal statement that the board is moving towards is to design learning experiences that motivate each student to realize their potential and love for learning. Students see themselves represented, supported, and loved through engaging instruction, curriculum, and our high expectations for their ongoing success towards our vision of a VPS graduate and beyond. And then we talked a little about the supporting goals to make that happen and the action steps that we as a district staff might need to do, and how you as a board want to monitor our progress with that and hold us accountable to this vision. The second priority area is related to student-centered staff. And the aspirational goal that we discussed today was to advance each student on their journey towards our vision of a VPS graduate through a diverse and skilled workforce that reflects our student population. Develop a culture of belonging by honoring the unique gifts of each student in an inclusive and inspiring learning community with both physical and emotional safety. And again, 3 supporting goals to try to make that happen. And then finally, student-centered community. Again, the goal statement: increase family and community trust, connection, and partnership to ensure each student can thrive in their journey towards our vision of a VPS graduate. Partner with families and community to help determine and deliver needed access and support for our students. 3 supporting goals to move that work forward as well. So I'll pause here. Obviously, we spent a full day exploring that and talking about how and what that looks like in action. Really appreciate the board's involvement today, the time that they spent getting to this day, and just invite any comments or questions at this point.
I'm just excited to almost be done. So I'm just really excited mainly to have, I think, just a blueprint, right, for the next couple of years.
I'll share that sentiment. And I would say done with the planning versus the implementation. I think I'm excited for the implementation to see this happen, but I appreciated the discussion today and kind of seeing these broad statements kind of narrow down into more specific goals that we'll work towards. So, yeah.
I think because this has been, 14 months in progress, 15 months in progress, it's excited to see where these goals have anchored, but also today getting an insight into how that will feed work plans, both for this coming specific school year, but also 5 to 6 years ahead. And that's obviously the real work we're all here to do in this finally post-COVID time. So thank you.
Okay, the last part of my report this morning is just the kind of the usual update, and we are on the tail end of a bond that our community supported a number of years ago. I'm very grateful for that. A lot of projects have been already completed that you have approved through the last several years, and the last major project is Ruth Bader Ginsburg Elementary, which is set to open this fall, welcoming kindergarten and first grade students to our first fully dual language school. This is an image of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You gave us an extra year to build this, and even with that extra year, just the challenges of construction these days and supplies and all those things. It's not quite ready yet. It will be, but they're still working on it. And so what would opening a school be without a little worry as the deadline approaches? And so just lots of opportunities there, and really grateful for the board to think about how we best utilize this bond, given that the bond was approved prior to COVID, and then a lot of things have changed in the community since then. And so your courage in looking at it and figuring out the best path forward, and we're super excited for students to benefit from that. So that's exciting. And then I know as we launch projects, sometimes we learn things about the project. And so one of the things that happened with the new Ogden Elementary is the drop off and pickup was very problematic. And so board approved us re-looking at that, reconfiguring that. And so that project is ready for the start of the year too, which will be great. That community has had to deal with that challenge for a number of years now, and we're excited about that. Now, this in no way encompasses all the work of AJ and his team in getting ready for the school year, but I thought it was two things to highlight. As we wrap up the bond, we will start to kind of reflect back over the years, and in our board meetings kind of recap that commitment that the community made and the benefit of that. So it's something to look forward to. And with that, that's all I have for the superintendent report. Happy to answer any other questions. I think maybe another thing with back to school is that it's already August 8th. August 30th is the first day. That's going to come really quickly. As the board knows, but maybe the entire community doesn't. If you're just tuning in for the first time, we did adopt a new student management system. Our old one was needing an update, and that has presented some unique opportunities as we get ready for the school year with our communication and making sure all that data migrates to the new system. And so our teams have been working really, really hard on that. And you approved in July a new tool to try to engage parents more and be more responsive to their needs, and that's called Parent Square. And so in the next couple of weeks, we'll be launching that with our community, and just grateful for people's patience as we try to implement new things that in the long run will make things better. But as we know, anytime you do a change, it's always challenging. So thank you in advance, family and staff, as we implement those things. So with that, I will stop the superintendent report, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to address them.
I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to include on that back to school kind of projects. Well, the project itself was completed last year. We didn't implement the school in the same way we had intended. So at the beginning of this school year, we are actually opening up Vita as its own school rather than as a lab school. So it's very exciting to see. It will be very exciting to see how that progresses and the benefits that those families reap, and also the benefits that we reap as a school district from the things that are learned at that school.
Thank you, Dr. Snell and Dr. Decker. I think we're all really excited for this new school year. So we will now go into our audience participation for our public comments. So citizen comments is the time in our meeting where the board and administrative staff welcome comments from the public. If you'd like to address the board and did not have an opportunity to sign in at the start of the meeting, please do so now. You may continue to sign in at any time during the citizen comments portion of our meeting. We ask that you approach the podium and state your name and affiliation with the district for the record. You will have 3 minutes to make your comments. When you hear a chime, please conclude your remarks. If you have materials or additional comments you would like the board to review, please hand them to the staff in the back of the boardroom. This information will be provided to the superintendent and the board. Because most of the matters require fact-finding and review, and the state's Open Public Meetings Act restricts deliberation on topics that have not been placed on publicly noticed agenda in advance, the board is not able to respond to any public comments made at this time. If follow-up action is necessary, the board will ask the superintendent to work with administrative staff to consider the information and respond accordingly. As a regular business meeting of the board, we expect that the audience to conduct themselves professionally and courteously. Speakers are also expected to be respectful. We ask the audience to refrain from clapping, cheering, or commenting while others give public comments, whether you are in support or against. We recognize that there is a diverse belief and feelings across our stakeholders in our district, but one thing that we have in common is that we all want to do what is best for our children. We are here today to work towards their future. The board asks that personnel complaints be submitted in writing, and disruptive conduct may cause the meeting to be adjourned and all audience members to be removed. The board appreciates, listens, and cares about the broad range of perspectives in our community. Thank you for your comments. We don't have any virtual comments tonight, so we will start with our in-person comments with Veronica Griffith? Virginia, sorry. Virginia Griffith, thank you.
First of all, I want to thank the board for their service and all the hours they put in. And I know that we all have the same goals for our children. We want them to have a good education, learning the basics, and teach them they can be whatever they want to be in this great country of ours. We disagree with the social issues the schools now feel is their duty to teach our children. When you ask a child, what would you like to be when you grow up? They will say a doctor one day and a fireman the next. This proves that they do not have the ability to make wise decisions at a young age. Our country was built on Judeo-Christian values, and teaching them at a young age that they can be whatever sex they want to be is ridiculous, and the parents and grandparents in America will never accept this idea. We will fight until we win with God on our side. I want to let you know about how the first pilgrims envisioned our country to be. They built a founder's monument in Plymouth, Massachusetts. And it was built of massive blocks of granite, and it was 80 feet high at the base and a little over 150 feet high. On the main pedestal stands a figure of faith. 1 foot rests on the forefather's rock. In her left hand, she holds an open Bible, and with the right hand lifted, she points to heaven. Looking downward, as there are 4 other pedestals around her, she is addressing. She seems to call them to trust in a higher power. The other 4 pedestals are morality, education, law, and liberty. In 1798, President John Adams said of America, "We have no government armed with power capable of contending with human passions unbridled by morality and religion. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other." And lastly, I just want to read the song about America. It says, "I'm proud to be an American where I know at least I'm free. I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. I'd gladly stand up and defend her still today, because there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
Thank you, Virginia. Next we have Lauren.
My name is Lauren Zeff. I'm a grandmother to students in the Vancouver School District and a business owner in Clark County. I want to thank Dr. Snell for meeting with my friends and I a couple of weeks ago. It was very generous of him, and I do appreciate it deeply. It gave me hope that we are safe here and that our First Amendment rights will be honored. First, I'd like to resubmit the request to remove all gender affirming curriculum from the core curriculum. Because the preferences of the families in the school district are divided down the middle, I request that the gender curriculum and all attached to it become an option, allowing parents to have full access to the information before they agree to either opt in or opt out to have their children receive it. In England, Finland, Norway, and Sweden, they have pulled back their support for transgender clinics to minors. Sweden's 10-year study shows that 5 to 7 years post-transition, there's a very high degree of remorse for the permanent alteration of their bodies. It's also true that 78% of minors that come to trans clinics present with other diagnoses in addition to gender dysphoria. The cultural push to not just accept transgenderism as a normal lifestyle choice, but to flood our media and schools with the trans agenda is alarming. And rather than everyone feeling welcome, I believe it's actually causing confusion to the young and the emotionally compromised. Our little ones should be having to decide which snack they want, not which sex they want to be. We know that the COVID lockdowns unleashed an unprecedented trauma response in our nation and to the world. Our kids are still dealing with trauma, as are we all. We see it everywhere around us, expressed as fear and anger, addiction, and violence. I propose the introduction of TBRI into the Vancouver School District. TBRI is a trauma intervention training designed to help children suffering from the effects of trauma, abuse, neglect, to help them overcome social, behavioral, emotional challenges. It is trust-based relational intervention. In short, TBRI for the classrooms equips teachers to help their kids re-regulate quickly and consistently. I'd like to propose TBRI be embraced district-wide as an option for teachers and counselors to help them reach, calm, and make consistently safe places for our kids across the district. Thank you very much. I've attached an article for the board's review. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lauren. Next we have Heather Vian.
My name is Heather Vian. I am a mother of 2 kids in the Vancouver School District. As I understand it, your equity policy is based on 2 pillars. The first pillar is fairness. That just means that every child has what they need to succeed. 2, belonging and inclusion. And this includes educational programs, services, activities, and technologies for everyone. I have 2 questions about the equity policy. The first one, how does this give administrative faculty and staff the right to override my right as a parent to exclude my child or children from supplemental social educational learning? The answer I was given by the faculty and the staff of my children's school is that they were following the Vancouver Public Schools equity policy by not giving me this right. 2, how does this policy give the school the right to elevate specific minority marginalized groups over other marginalized groups? So every time you create every time that you create you elevate a minority group, they become a supremacy group, and then everyone else is below. This creates an us versus them mentality, which also creates conflict, chaos, and confusion. And it also creates an influx for the need of school counselors. I kind of think of it like this. There's two kids playing in a pool. They're splashing, they're having fun. And then all of a sudden, one decides that they want to dunk the other person. Well, this person over here doesn't like being dunked. So then they decide to dunk the other one back. And then we have a dunking match. Before we know it, someone's about to drown. And I would like to ask this board a very serious question. Where are the adults that would come in and stop this behavior? Where's the lifeguards on duty? The other thing I would like to ask too for the school year is that we can be fully transparent with the curriculum. And I'm not just talking about the academic curriculum, but I'm talking about everything that is supplemental. That includes social emotional learning, any supplemental social emotional learning, and including the sex education, because honestly, as a parent, I don't even really fully know everything that is taught in those categories. And I believe that there are a lot of parents out there that would really benefit from knowing what it is exactly that is being taught to our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Next we have Richard.
I thank you for the opportunity to be speaking here today. Richard Erickson, Vancouver resident and taxpayer, also a parent and grandparent. I'd like to see much more time addressing the shortcomings of what hasn't been accomplished in the schools. The curriculum has spent far too much time with implementing diversity, inclusion, and equity. Are we presenting an optimistic view of the future to our students? It's said we live in the greatest country in the world, and I still believe that. And I look at what COVID and the policies to deal with it did to our schools. Mandatory masks, shutdowns, and other extraordinary measures were enforced to the detriment of our children's education and mental health, and the hardships on parents were also very detrimental. Are our schools teaching our students an optimistic view of the future? What are the statistics students actually enrolled in our secondary schools? Has enrollment fully recovered after COVID? If not, why not? Are programs designed to allow our students to excel to their fullest potential? I think we need a better emphasis on our excelling in curriculum based on graduating our kids with a proficiency in basic skills. We can do better than 60% fail rate in English and science and a fall rate of 70% in math. We have good teachers. Let them teach subject matter appropriate to academic excellence instead of the social engineering that's become so prevalent.
Thank you, Richard. That concludes our public comment time. So thank you to all who shared your public comments. As I mentioned at the start of our meeting, the board cannot respond directly to any public comments or questions because Washington State's open public meetings law requires a district to provide advance notice of topics that will be discussed. Although we cannot respond to your individual comments, it is important that we state that the board's unequivocal support for each and every one of our students. All of our students have value and deserve to be respected for who they are. We welcome, value, promote diversity among students, employees in our community. Again, thank you for taking the time to share your thoughts with the board. So we are now going to move into our action items. The first on our list is approval of minutes for our July 11th meeting. Do I have a motion?
I motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any comments or questions? We will move for a vote. All those in favor in approving the meeting minutes. Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Barrows,
Approve.
Director Smith,
Approve.
And I also vote to approve, so the motion passes. We have items on our consent agenda. So there's a slate of items set for approval under our instructional and administrative support, and we also have items under our fiscal support services. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion, comments, or questions? Seeing that there is no, yeah, no, okay. Seeing that there's no discussion, we're going to put it to a vote. Director Smith,
Approve.
Director Barros,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Decker,
Approve.
and I also vote to approve, so the motion passes. Under our regular business, we have a couple first readings of policies. I believe Taylor will be giving us an overview of these policies.
Thank you. Yes, there's 4 policies for first read. The first is policy 2190, highly capable programs. In the recent legislative session, changes were made to the referral and screening process for our highly capable programs. The proposed policy revisions and administrative procedure will incorporate these changes, including universal screening and the use of a multidisciplinary selection committee. The second policy you have is policy 3241, student discipline. The proposed revision to this policy just updates the terminology used in the policy by replacing the term emergency expulsion with the term emergency removal, as instructed by our state legislature. The proposed revision does not make any substantive changes to the policy. And then the third and fourth policy on the agenda are connected. The third policy is policy 5800, prohibition of harassment, intimidation, and bullying. The proposal is to repeal this policy and replace it with a new policy, which would also be numbered 5800. And the new policy is called employee conflict resolution. This proposed policy, new policy outlines a conflict resolution process for employees that aligns with the current language of our collective bargaining agreement with our certificated staff. The proposed policy and an accompanying administrative procedure encourage early resolution of conflicts and provides for administrative support when necessary to help resolve employee conflicts. So those are the 4 policies on the agenda, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them.
So this is just the first reading, so we will then vote on them next month. So thank you. Thank you, Taylor. We will now recess this board meeting for the purpose of holding a public hearing for our budget. So I'd like to invite our Associate Superintendent Brett Schmitz to present our budget for this school year.
Thank you, Director Zavala. So we have a series of slides to kind of preview the overall budget. The actual budget that will be submitted to the state is a very thick, exhaustive document. So I've attempted to summarize some of the key elements of the budget and specifically highlighting some of the trends from previous years for your consideration before we ask you to adopt. So the first slide that I would like to share is just a reminder slide that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the general fund, which is where all of our operations and educational programs are financed. But we do have some very specialized funds that have unique budgets according to state law. For instance, Transportation Vehicle Fund, that is dedicated strictly for the purchase of buses, yellow buses. And it's financed through largely revenue from the state based on a depreciation schedule for our fleet. Capital Projects Fund is where the residuals of our bond and state match funds reside as we wind down those projects. And then Debt Service Fund is dedicated strictly for the servicing of our long-term debt, the bonds that were approved in 2017. Obviously, they're financed by annual taxation to our patrons. And Associated Student Body, also known as ASB Fund, is dedicated to student activities, and those revenues are generated by students and co-managed with building administrators by their Associated Student Body elected officials. So we account for those in dedicated funds. But as you can see, the lion's share of the revenues and expenses and the decisions that we are confronted with reside within the general fund. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive into some of the main elements of that general fund budget. The first thing we always highlight and start with in our budget process is enrollment. As most of us know, that is the primary driver of our state revenues, which is our largest single revenue source. You can see that prior to 2020-21, which was the onset of the pandemic, we were slightly declining, and that was a result of lower cohorts entering the system than those that were being graduated out. And then certainly COVID for Vancouver Public Schools, like most districts, saw a pretty dramatic reduction. As we emerged from the pandemic, you can see that there was slight growth in 22-23. Compared to 21-22 actual. And so we're still entering lower cohorts, but there was a little bit of a rebound from the COVID effect is what we attribute that small growth to. As we look forward, we anticipate or prepared for the possibility of returning back to that kind of attrition level until our kindergarten cohorts start returning or at least returning to their previous levels, which our long-term demographer is forecast to be maybe 3 or 4 years from now before we start to see those larger kindergarten cohorts. So that's the basis of a lot of our revenue. So we always start with that. One of the other major variances that we always want to highlight as we prepare the budget and ask for your consideration is kind of what's the district savings account looking like. The state term for that in this nonprofit environment is fund balance, is kind of the term we use for cash reserves or savings. Our beginning fund balance is very robust at 34 million, but you can see there's some specific categories where large pockets of that are assigned. By design, we've carried a large fund balance in anticipation of kind of some hardships that we were preparing for. Number one, around the decline in enrollment, but number two, the exhausting of ESSER funds or the federal stimulus money that we've enjoyed for the last 3 years. So this budget represents a strategic investment of those cash reserves that we've been building and holding in anticipation of this transition year. So you can see the deployment of those resources would leave us a little less than $19 million of reserves. Which is still a lot of money, but when you compare it to the size of our budget and our operations, you can see that that's about 4.5% of our expenditures, which puts us just slightly below the board's targeted ending fund balance. But again, given the factors and considerations, I think there was an acknowledgement that this would be a time to strategically dip below and then regroup and look to a long-term plan to maybe return back to those ranges of the target. We'll go ahead and move on to just kind of a 3-year look of our budgeted revenue by source. And you can see that the lion's share of our revenue still comes from the state general purpose or apportionment funding, which again is driven by enrollment. The couple things that I would highlight on this is if you go to the second from the right group of bars, federal special purpose, a significant drop. And again, that can be attributed to the exhaustion of the federal stimulus funds, which we've referred to as ESSER, the acronym for the education specific portion of those federal appropriations. With those sunsetting, then we'll see that significant drop. The other one that I would highlight is state special purpose showed a pretty good growth, and we can thank the state legislature for finally addressing some special ed shortfalls. By no means have they met their constitutional obligation in most of our opinions, but at least a significant down payment was made the previous legislative session, which is reflected in this budget. Moving on to the next slide. Now we have a couple, or I think it's 3 slides that kind of analyze our expenditures by various elements of the state chart of accounts or account elements within our expenditure codes. The things that I would highlight on this is we do see an increase in basic ed, which is obviously where most of our teaching and student support activities occur. I think we can attribute most of that to a transfer from the federal stimulus, which you can see right next to the basic ed series of columns has dramatically reduced. Again, that I think can be attributed to we were using federal stimulus money to offset some of the lost state revenues and basic education support. Now we're shifting those back to basic education in the absence of those federal resources. I think we went one, two, maybe two too many. There we go. Thank you. This set of bar charts analyzes our expenditures by what we call activity groups, and you can kind of see based on the descriptions how that's sliced. It really is about what types of services are being supported with those investments. What I would highlight here is that we're seeing a little bit of a shift from support services. In the middle of that visual to the far left, which is the teaching area. And again, I think that's more about percentages because what we're seeing in terms of the change is with no ESSER funds, some of the one-time investments that we made in operational supports like HVAC and technology are no longer present in the budget. And so the teaching resumes a higher position in terms of percentage in the absence of those significant one-time operational investments that we made last year with ESSER funds. Everything else stays pretty constant. You can see in building administration and central administration. And then lastly, if we analyze the expenditures based on what the state calls object code, it's really, this is again kind of the nature of the expense. Is it paid as a salary or is it non-employee related cost? You can see here that again, we see the biggest change is on that far right column. We see that the capital equipment, which again reflects those one-time ESSER funded investments in HVAC and technology, is really reduced to basically zero. And so that inflates some of the other percentages, specifically certificated salaries, which we would expect to be our largest category. And it again, it assumes a greater percentage of the overall expenditures in the absence of those one-time expenses from last year. So then if we
just a point of clarification on that. Again, we're just speaking about the general fund at this point. And so we would see capital investments in some of our other funding structures, correct?
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that correction. Yeah. The capital projects fund is really about entire buildings and significant systems and improvements. We can in the general fund make what they call capital equipment improvements, but those are more like components or major repairs versus an entire new wing of a school or complete new roof, for example. So yeah, there is that distinction. So I appreciate you illuminating that potential confusion. I think this is my second to last slide. So beginning about 5 or 6 years ago, we began being mandated by the state legislature to prepare a 4-year budget outlook. So this captures the general fund, which again is where most of those decisions and analysis go into our planning. The other funds largely run themselves after significant decisions are made around bonds and things like that. In the general fund, I will acknowledge right up front that it's nearly impossible to forecast even 1 year out, let alone 4 years out, when we have such volatility around legislative policies. Certainly recently, the pandemic has thrown a major monkey wrench into some of our long-term forecasts and projections. And then again, enrollment is always a little unpredictable based on we used long-term demographers, but nobody has that crystal ball. So we take these with a grain of salt, but it is a useful exercise to at least say, hey, based on what we know now, if we play that forward, what would the game plan look like to stabilize certainly the first thing we would look at is ending fund balance to say, are we in a position to operate sustainably? And if so, what are the assumptions and behaviors that we would have to embrace to get to that level of sustainability? And so with this, I would just say, you know, 18 to $20 million is probably on the lower end of the target, but it certainly stabilizes the fund balance. But it also requires, as you can see, some moderation on expenditures starting next year. And then also it assumes that we will continue to grow enrollment, whether that's state policy, whether that's enrollment, or did I say enrollment? Revenue. We grow revenue, whether that's state dictated by state policy or enrollment growth. So we will certainly review this again next year and look at the decisions that we need to make next year to start to achieve that kind of stable and sustainable level of expenditures compared to what our forecasted revenues are in the short term, and then again in the long term next year. And then our last slide is just an annual review that we do of the property taxes, knowing that we rely heavily and we've enjoyed in this district tremendous support from our voters and taxpayers. So we always want to celebrate that support, but also acknowledge that we try to work to manage those tax rates in a way that honors their trust in us and the investments that they've made. Really focusing on the table of numbers in the middle there, you can see that last 3 years, we've seen a decline in overall tax rates as our assessed values have grown. Prior to that, there was a bump up in 2021, but as many of us may remember, that was the year in which a supplemental levy was legally authorized by the legislature and our voters supported it after 2 years of that $1.50 cap that was delivered as part of the McCleary decision and then changed based on state policy and recognition that the $1.50 was maybe a little aggressive in that state requirement. So once the state moved that target, our voters were supportive of that. And so that attributed the increase that we saw in 2021. That concludes my preview or review of the budget. I understand that we haven't had anybody sign up for the public testimonies element of this budget hearing, but I'm certainly open to any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Brett, for that very great presentation. No, I really do want to say thank you because you do such a great job explaining, and for us who don't have to deal with numbers every day, it's something that I can understand and grasp. We now welcome our audience to give any input concerning the budget. Similar to public comment, you do have 3 minutes to share your concerns. I don't know when signed up, but still, okay, great. So any comments if you'd like to go to the podium? Yes. And we as a board are not able to respond to the comments, just so you know. So similar to public comments, but we're here to listen to your comments.
I just want to say that those ESSER funds came at a high price. You got your money, but the children got no school.
Thank you, Virginia.
Good evening. My name is Jake Winship. I'm a parent within the district, and I just want to express some concern with the substantial drawdown of reserve we saw in the most recent year. It does seem that the 4-year projection seems relatively optimistic that it will be at or near revenue exceeding or close to exceeding expenditures. But are there contingencies in place in case there are negative results? Because it seems as though half of the contingency fund is basically gone. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Does one of our board members have any comments?
I also want to thank Brett and team. I serve on the budget committee on behalf of the board along with Director Smith. And I think one thing before we review this presentation in August, it's really a 12-month process to get here. But from the board perspective, we really get engaged in the beginning of the calendar year, January, February. And it's a continuous cycle of analysis, forecasting, revision, waiting on the legislative updates, and then we go back through the process. I think this year we're positioned in a really coming out of ESSER, coming out of the COVID reality, we have been measured in our approach to ensure that there's a minimal impact on the classroom, which is something I'm very proud of the work that we've done to support the services we have for students and to support our staff. So we have made a considerable investment this year from our fund balance, but it was very healthy to start with. And I do trust the safeguards we have in place going forward. But I just want to thank Brett and team and just also for the public to be aware that this is it's an ongoing cycle, but the board is involved from about January, February up till August when we approve the budget.
Thank you, Director Sproul. Did you want to share something?
Yeah, I just also appreciate in previous meetings as well, just the discussion and direction from the board to take a stair-step approach to the budget and recognizing that some of the challenges that we face with fund balance and when and how we expend those sources, and that those are one time. And that once you do that, you don't have that reserve anymore. And so thinking about over the last 3 years, how does that reflect a process that allows for continuation of services and utilizing those ESSER funds for needed supports of students, be it infrastructure, which is great, and opportunity that we don't usually have to use general fund dollars in that way. And then also additional staff to support students. We had a number of amazing staff members that are no longer in those positions because of that stair-step approach. And so want to honor their work that they did the last couple of years. And then also recognize that those are hard decisions for the board to know that we're eliminating those positions, consolidating our staff as we move through a reduction or contraction of our budget. And this will be a difficult year. We wait to see with enrollment, but given that the birth rates have been lower, it's like there's just not a lot of kindergartners out there. It's not necessarily a direct result of pandemic or choosing not to be in public schools. There's just not as many students, and when you're graduating large classes, it's tough to catch up. And so we don't anticipate all of a sudden 2,000 new students, but we will update the board on enrollment as it comes in and the impact it has on some of these forecasts that Brett has made, because enrollment is such a big driver of that. The other thing is the legislative cycle and the first and second years of those cycles and potential impact. And so going into this session, we don't anticipate more than we had last year, maybe the same. And so we really feel like we have the constraints given to us and we have a path forward, but that doesn't make it easy. And so just recognizing that, acknowledging that as we move into this school year. So, and appreciate the thoughtful comments tonight from both board and patrons about the budget, and Brett and his team for preparing it.
Thank you, everyone. So our public hearing is now closed and we will now resume our regular meeting. So do I have a motion to adopt our 2023-2024 budget?
I motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion, additional comments or questions? No? Okay. See that there's no discussion. We are going to put it to a vote. Director Decker,
Approve.
Director Sproul,
Approve.
Director Barros,
Approve.
Director Smith,
Approve.
and I am also approved, so the motion passes. We are now into our Board of Directors report. Do any of our directors have anything they would like to report to our community?
I was just going to share a little bit about the conference that I went to last week. Last week, I was able to join district staff in going to a UDL conference, which UDL is Universal Design for Learning. There were district administrators, teachers, staff that all went to the conference, and Universal Design for Learning is really about how can we design our learning so that it's accessible to all students. And I had a lot of good takeaways. They really talked about it being a tool and not the goal. Our goal is not Universal Design for Learning. It's a tool that can help students access and really looking at designing from diverse perspectives. There were some great keynotes. There was a wonderful panel at the end from 3 women with disabilities who are in leadership positions, advocacy positions, and they really talked about their experiences in education and gave us a lot of good insights. I went to several breakout sessions about systems change, looking at UDL from a trauma lens, social emotional learning, autism, but also along with the learning, it was a really great experience just to be there with our staff and to have those opportunities to share insights with staff and to hear their takeaways. And, you know, there was one kind of breakout time that I had where I heard from the administrators and just what their takeaways were and kind of what their thoughts are about how we are going to take this to our staff. And really just that community building time with staff and getting to know them not only as colleagues for Vancouver Public Schools, but as humans and just people who care about students and love education and just having that time to get to know each other better. So it was a great conference. I'm really excited. And also as we kind of go through this strategic plan, I noticed, you know, the term universally designed instruction and things like that that are in there. So I think it's a key time in kind of building up our skills, and yeah, it was a great conference.
Thank you. Anyone else? No? I just want to say, have a great first day of school. I mean, I know we still have a couple other meetings, but I think this is our in-person meeting. So I just wanted to say, have a great first day of school to everyone, to all of our teachers especially. I know they're all working really hard to get prepped and ready for our kids. So thank you, everyone. That concludes our regular board meeting at 6:25. We are now going to recess into an executive session. The subject is personnel to discuss the performance of a public employee. No action to follow. When we return, we will just be adjourning the meeting and we won't have any action items. We anticipate this will take 45 minutes. So thank you and have a great Tuesday. It is now 7:21. Our executive session is over. No action was taken. Have a great night.